So why don't we go ahead and just get this party started? We got like 20 people. I'm impressed. This is a lot. We actually that's almost as much as we have listening to our podcasts.
Where do we see who's on, Mike? Is there a way for me to see it?
I don't see the names. I just see a little blurb at the top of the live that shows a number.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah. If I looked in the live stream, I probably could see who's in which one, but that's confusing. So I'm not going to do that. We're just going to go in faith that we're going to stay live.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I said, type in on the comments who you are and where you're from and that, because that's cool. I mean, like, we want to know, or don't. It's America or Canada. You can do what you want.
So why don't you why don't you catch us up, Spence? What's been going on down there in the holler?
Man, it's the dog days. It's that frustrating time when you want to get a lot of stuff done, but you're just so wore out you can't. So, we've had the COVID stuff, and we've kind of had this radical reshaping of business, and hired a guy. 10 days later, he used it to leverage another farm job, so that was fun. Hired another guy, just moved up here from Baton Rouge, and to give me and Drew a break. But we've just been producing. Our restaurants kind of on or off. I'm sure some of you other folks have been experiencing that. And it's just so unpredictable with the restaurants. So it Across the Creek Farm's really been turned on its head. My baler broke, and turns out I don't think I can fix it. So we welded the arm, and it's this arm that pushes the hay in, to where it gets packed in to make the bales. And then I figured out that my baler was from 1971 or 66 to 71. And I can't find that part, so we're looking at buying a new baler and then re-examining our options because we don't want to pay $24,000 for a baler. My friend Zach is on there. So
yeah, I see Amy from Michigan and Susan from Ontario. Hey, nice of you guys to join us. Kevin from Ohio. Kenny, we already got him from California.
Zach, I coach basketball with Zach Newcomb. He's one of the guys that helped me after the war. He's got a podcast, Point Momentum, that he just fired up. Oh, we got some Archie folks, McKnight. So
yeah, well, you'll appreciate this. I think in one of your shows we talked about my new tractor. So I put 50 hours on that thing and got my service all done.
Look at you,
which was kind of interesting, but
the service.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just change everything, and
like everything.
Yeah, it's like
it's like here's $800 of fluid.
Yeah, pretty much. It wasn't. I bought all the supplies from the dealer, and they said you don't have to do it here and you can do it yourself and keep the warranty and all that stuff is great. So I went and bought all the parts, and it didn't say I needed to replace the hydraulic fluid, but they gave me 5 gallons of hydraulic fluid, and I know why, because when I took out the one filter, like there was no way to stop it. It just ran out. So I wasted about 4.5 gallons of
your
hydraulic
farm
fluid.
Is now a super fun site.
So, I actually caught most of it. The rest of it went on the driveway. The chips the asphalt chips that I got a couple months ago. But so what else you got going on? How? So you mentioned you turned your farm on its head, the business model. Have you, generally speaking, are you up from where you were in volume? Have you recovered that lost shaky?
So we are. Yeah, that's a good question. We are like. I need to stop pointing a knife. This is things my wife would tell me. She's not here to make me acceptable to the public.
I don't mind.
Yeah. So yeah. Susan might. she's a peace loving person. So, but yeah, so it got turned on its head. We're actually a little ahead of where we were last year. And so we've done a lot of retail, and we started that online delivery service. I think we did an episode of the Fighting Farmer. I think I may have just said Farting Farmer.
I think that's what it sounded like. But.
Is it? Yeah. We did have Mexican food tonight, but we used our chorizo, not beans. So, but yeah, so we started that in October, November. I just had a gut feeling, and I just felt it was something I should do. And boom, that set us up for COVID. And so, so that was really good. You know, there's a big slug of that, and then everybody's kind of backing off. And now I think there's going to be another slug because everybody's panicking and with the COVID stuff now in Arkansas, and especially where we're at. And so that went really good. Something that really has made a difference is processing. So I make so much per bird because, you know, I'm in a partnership. I got all my equipment, use someone else's room inspection. We've talked about that. And essentially I got my equipment in someone else's plant, and I handle chickens, and they can continue to kill red meat. And he's an Air Force vet, really neat family and cousins and that do it down in Winslow, Arkansas. If you know where the tunnel is, if you've ever head to Northwest Arkansas, you go under the tunnel. It's up atop the tunnel. That's Winslow's, or around there. So, and if you're from Arkansas, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody else is like, why is that guy talking about the tunnel? Let it go, Spence. So, but yeah, so we've done a lot of processing, and we're booked out, and I'm sure that's the same all across the country. And those processing fees, man, I mean, the difference is the amount of time I've been spending in the plant, you know, and how fast we've gotten. We upgraded to some Poultryman equipment. This live stream brought to you by Poultryman, Hughesville, Pennsylvania's finest pastured poultry supplier. We had so that's Mike, if y'all don't know. He sells that stuff.
Sell a plucker so I can buy some headphones.
Yeah, so he doesn't have to do duct tape. He gave me a discount. If he wouldn't have given me the discount, he could have bought new headphones. So it's your own fault, Mike. But so we got this plucker for Mike. We used to have a brand, which I'm not going to mention because I don't want to deal with that. And we always had to have a guy like bent over, keeping the heads and legs from getting stuck. And then we'd have to pick it up. It was a tub style, and throw it in. And it was rated for what we were doing, but we wore that sucker out within a year and a half, 2 years, and it rusted all up. So I called Mike in a panic, and he shipped me out one. And this thing never stops. We had one that had a foot pedal that, you know, you to turn on. We thought it could, you know, like, oh, well, this Mike's is going to be, you know, there's a lot of like, I don't know, Spence, this one's okay, you know. What's this new voodoo Badger Magic you're getting? And that should be your nickname, your hashtag on Twitter, Badger Magic. Think about it.
Okay.
So but anyway, so this new one, it just always is running that we got from Mike, and that sucker has sped us up. I don't know, 75, 100 birds an hour. It is crazy how quick it is. It's really cut down on the labor. I got it high because I'm a little over 6 foot. So it has a table. We just open the door and it shoots the birds out. I take the oil gland off, hang them, and that thing has been nice. And that's really enabled us, you know. It used to be 1,200 birds was like terrible. And now 1,200 birds were done by 2, you know, and we never get started on time. Like we're always get started at 9. I mean, so we're up 250, 275 in that. So, I'm sorry. I'm getting distracted by all these comments. You guys are awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad that worked out. You know, processing equipment has kind of been off the hook here last, you know, I don't know when it started, probably 3 months now. It's, we're about a month out, between 3 weeks and 4 weeks out of any equipment these days. So it might be slowing down, but we're not through our backlog yet. So it's hard to say. Yeah. And actually tomorrow, so what I'm going to do tomorrow is, you know, this is what happens when everybody panics.
Sorry.
I had an order from somebody, and they're trying to process birds. And I said, when they ordered, I'm like, it's 3 to 3.5 weeks, before we ship. And so they're pushing, trying to get an estimate, and I understand that. So I'm trying to get an estimate from the builder, the fabricator, and there was some miscommunication in what order I was talking about, because they're like, well, it'll be like Friday or Monday, and then it was like definitely going out Tuesday afternoon. I'm like, all right, cool, we can make that. And so Tuesday afternoon came, and I'm like, where's that tracking number? Like, for that order, that's going to go out next Thursday or something. Like, it's not done yet. And I'm like, and of course I panic because I've already told this person that their stuff's going to be shipped out, and we're going to try to priority mail it to get it there in time for the weekend. So I'm going to West Virginia tomorrow. It's a 7.5 hour slog. I got a 30-inch scalder, 27-inch plucker, and a table in the back of my truck. So
is it for Josh?
No, it's not for Josh.
Is it not for Josh? Okay.
I'd make him pay extra, but
yeah. I actually think he's in Syria now.
Okay.
Josh is a guy. Y'all may or may not know Josh, but he's a guy. He has like 50 businesses. He was a Marine. It's saw gunner like I was in the Army, and then he became a C-130 pilot. The big planes. I used to jump out of them in the Army, and now he's a commercial pilot. Has like 50 fireworks stands, started Pastured Poultry, was building a USDA processing plant.
Yeah.
Stop, Josh.
Crazy.
But anyways, I think he just got deployed to Syria. So
yeah, I don't know where I know he's getting deployed. So why don't we just pause here? Like, if you guys have a question, we just thought we'd spend a minute catching up. It's been a long time since we've had an episode here together. So type of question, and then we'll go ahead and answer. That's our primary goal tonight, is to answer some questions. So
yeah,
ask real ones, make some up, try to trip us up. We can do it all.
If you ask anything about USDA, I'm going to say talk to Greg, because that's what I do. Greg Gunthorpe.
And now, so the irony here is I'm going to West Virginia tomorrow, 7.5 hour journey one way to deliver processing equipment, going to dump it and head back. Then on Monday, I'm going back to West Virginia to pick up 750 turkeys, and probably get back in town later Monday evening with turkeys. So
how old are they poults, or are they
day old?
Day old.
Yep. So some of them are for distribution. For folks, like, and then some I'll raise out. I should end up with about 110 in my brooder.
So if you need to buy a turkey, guy, and you're in Pennsylvania, I thought about doing turkeys this year. It just always, last year we had a shipping disaster, and I think I had 4 that survived because I had heat stress. It's terrible. But man, my ground chicken, I'm producing hundreds of pounds of ground chicken a week.
Yeah. So tell me about that. You were mentioning before we jumped on, you're going to do a sausage farm. So
that's just an awkward statement, Mike. A sausage farm. I don't even know where to start with that.
You're doing sausage. You were proud of some sausage.
Much.
So what do you got going? It's 8:30.
Yeah. Oh, look, we got some good questions. Yeah. 7:30 here, bro. Yeah. So yeah, we do a lot of sausage, and mostly just from big birds. It's hard to sell, especially the breast, more than anything. But we can talk. We can come back to that.
Okay. You want to?
All right. So we got one from Kevin.
You want to bring on Kevin's question here?
Yeah. So he said, I had a chicken that would only walk backwards, and when it sat with its legs straight out. Can you tell me what was wrong or what that chicken had? It depends. If its neck was wry, it was stargazer. You'll see it's a genetic deficiency. Sometimes it's vitamin, where they'll start with the kind of twisted neck, and then their neck twists all the way. That's one thing it could be. It's a really weird thing when you see it, and it's never like a lot of chickens. It's usually 1 or 2. and that's just an oddball genetic thing. The other thing it could be, South is like straight out. It could be like viral arthritis, or there's a whole bunch of things. That would be what Jeff would tell you, and Jeff is always right, so go with Jeff. But Jeff Maddox from Fur Trail. But so that could be something. But man, I feel like Mike was wondering how long it would take me to talk about necrotic enteritis. But there's actually, I think there's a lot of stuff that happens to chickens' legs, like that hock joint. That comes from secondary infections started by stuff like necrotic enteritis, cocci, anything that damages the gut, any poultry disease that damages the gut. I think it allows bacteria into the body itself, and they tend to cause problems in the hocks, especially in Cornish cross. That is my working hypothesis. Notice I didn't say theory, because that is my pet peeve when people say theory instead of hypothesis. But so that could be it. If it was one chicken, probably a stargazer, and the stargazers will have that twisted neck. They call them stargazers because it always looks like they're looking up at the stars, even though you usually see them in daylight. But anyway, so Kevin, I don't know if that helps, but look up viral arthritis. A lot of times when you see them with their legs out in front of them, that's what that is. Do you have anything to add to that, Mike?
No, not really. I think, knowing how many that are affected in the flock, if it's just that one or two, or like out of 100 or something, that's just move on, usually pretty safe. Yeah. It's not, sometimes that happens, but if it starts creeping up to be like 5-10% of your flock, then, it's getting something to be concerned about and hard to figure it out. But
yeah. And guys, if you have like in depth, you can email me at fightingfarmerspence@gmail.com. So, if you feel like there's more to it. Yeah. Hey, Ginger and David had a question.
So they want to ask how has the plucker door and exit chute changed your processing. So let me just set up what that is first, Spence, and you can talk about it.
Go for it.
So Spence bought a 35-inch plucker with a door on it, and the door on the Poultryman is mechanical, so it's not automated, and that's intentional. Eli's not going to ever change it, no matter how much you tell him. The Ashleys are nicer with the automated timer. So that's and they spit that out into a receiving table, and we kind of built Spence's table to be a height that he was comfortable working on, and the plucker matches it. So, so he's working, he's emptying the birds out of the chute, and you just pull the handle, open the door, and the centrifugal force of the birds spit out on the table. And then he does some prep work there and moves them on down the line. So that's the general idea of how it's working.
Yeah. And so one thing that we did is we put the door on the wrong side. So I'm going to have to get with the welder. Because right now, if we just open up the door, they shoot out onto the floor and get condemned. So we actually have a sheet pan. My son holds up a sheet pan. It's like, as all these chickens pop them. And then they stay on the table. We're going to weld either that, or we'll probably just weld like a panel, a stainless steel panel on there. So how has it changed the processing, Ginger? It's cut out a person. So you think like when you do 1,200 chickens, and we have been getting a lot of big chickens, like especially for retail, people are like everybody, most folks would know this. Processing is a fixed cost. And so if you send small birds, big birds, the whole bird market has been kind of wiped out because one, it's summer, so people aren't roasting chickens. And then two, all the restaurants are shut down. And that's where usually most of your whole birds go, at least in our part of the country. And they cut them up because that's the economical way for them to do it and do what they do. So everybody needs to do cut-ups, which stinks from the plant perspective because we got beef, pork, we're just swamped. We're booking into, I think, December of 2020 or 2021 if you're trying to get a cow in, by the way. So so what that's done is it's taken that guy that had to pick one chicken up. We had to pick 2 chickens up or however many at a time. So if you have 1,200 chickens and say they're an average 5-pound dress out, 1,200 times 5 is 6,000 pounds. that meant that someone had to pick up 6,000 pounds of chicken, put it on a table. So right there, we saved someone picking up 3 tons of chicken, which fatigue on the employees, and that's greatly helped. And then just taking that step out, it's just you flip a latch and boom. So instead of something taking, I don't know how long will it take? 4 seconds of chicken, or depending on how big. If they're big, you can't do more than one really. And your back being bent over. So you think of 12,000, or not 12,000, one day, 1,200 times 4 seconds, like that's time that's saved. It's an employee who's making how much ever an hour in that. So yeah, it's just that automation would be where I think. And I will say, Mike, you talked about the Ashleys, which I'm not super familiar with, but you said they had an automatic timer. I do not want an automatic timer, because the great thing about the way we have it is I have it so it's set up. The top of the plucker is probably about my chin height, and so I can see over in those as they're bouncing up. And sometimes I need to stay a little longer. The difference between the wash table being buried and it going, after everything's out, they're just boom, 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 boom. Like where they're just taking the inside out, they're not having to pick a bunch of wing feathers and that. The difference is the scald, but it's also the plug. And one thing I didn't like about our old tub style plucker was that it was on a timer. So this way, especially the bigger birds, they're a little sturdier. Man, I'll just run them. They don't fall apart. We might have an extra broken wing every now and again, but I'll run them longer because the savings on labor, and labor when people are on payroll, you're paying several $100s an hour. So it's like, man, that's the ticket. So those are some of the ways that it's really helped Ginger. I don't know if that's clear or not. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah. And so basically what you're saying there with the pluck time is, as you go through your day, like the pluck duration can be variable, right? 30 seconds might work one time, but later in the day, it might need to be 35 or 40 because the scald just changes a little bit as you go through the day. Right. And if you have so yeah, I mean, I've noticed in my processing days, and when you don't change the water out, you can add fresh water to it, but it does change the quality of the scald throughout the day.
And Mike's has a hose on the top. It's better than the other one we had. It's like a nozzle, and at first it was putting too much water. One thing we did, if you're looking at that, something nice we did was the other plucker, we had a crate and it would catch feathers. And this is something else, Ginger. And we would have to change that crate like every 3 minutes. Someone would have to pick up a crate of wet feathers and heads, that would get pulled off and dump it. We don't have to do that anymore. I got this set up and it worked out perfect. It was kind of serendipity. We didn't plan it, but it just worked out great. We ended up taking the 55-gallon barrels, we use them as gut barrels throughout the plant. I just took a Sawzall and cut a notch out. There's a notch at the bottom of Mike's plucker. And then I took a hammer drill and drilled holes around the bottom and at the very bottom and on the side. And so one of those barrels will hold 600 birds worth of feathers, or like 4 Freedom Rangers if you do Freedom Rangers. But like for Cornish cross, you can put like 600 Cornish cross feathers worth on there. We did redbirds one day and we did not have enough barrels. Anyways, and so that's another thing, I mean, you think of hauling, dumping all those wet feathers. This, we just roll the barrel, push it over like 15 foot, and then slide the other one under and we're good to go. So that's another thing.
Cool. If you have any follow up there, Dave or Ginger, just shoot us back in the text. But we got another question, folks. If you're just coming in, we're taking questions. Feel free to ask whatever you want. We got one from Brian and Meredith here. I'm going to bring it on the screen. And my question here would be, at what stage? You just mean in general, like just starting out with your pastured poultry, or?
Yeah, she said that earlier. They're rice and soybean, I think, and looking at.
Okay.
Out in the Delta. That's over by the Mississippi for y'all non-Arkies. So, and they said, we'll be starting out. What's the number one resource that you use or wish you had used when you started out? What do you think there, Mike?
So it's a hard question. I think I think I've talked about this in one of my shows before, but I think one of the number one resources that I managed to find was Appa.
Pastured Poultry Talk podcast, right?
Well, that came after I forgot what I knew. I get every day I get to learn what I don't know. But when I just started out, I didn't really produce and raise any chickens before I came into Appa. I mean, that's not quite true. I raised some hens and stuff before that, but when I started like actually raising meat birds and trying to think about selling them and things like that, Appa was one of the first resources I pulled, and that just plugging in, that led me into connections with people like Jeff and people. And I tried to find the people who were smarter than me, is what I want to say there. And that was my resource. So, and I still kind of work under that model. I still try to find the people who are smarter than me, like Spence here. That's why he's on the live stream tonight. But
it's hard for Mike to find people smarter than him. Not so much for me.
Well, that's very flattering. But so that's the resource that's the resource for me. What about you, Spence?
Well, I'm flattering you, Mike, to get discounts on poultry processing equipment, if that's not obvious. I think Appa is a terrific place. And, the big thing is always just to find those people smarter than you. I don't know what Greg Gunthorpe or Jeff Maddox does. Like, it's lonely at the top, I guess. But no, seriously, or Dave. Maybe Dave just talks to Ginger. That's what Dave does down there in Florida. But yeah, there's some amazing people in Appa, and that's APPA.org. There's a listserv there. I mean, it really is like other people. I charge $100 an hour, and I'm not nearly as active as I used to be on it. But I mean, you get thousands of dollars worth of consulting advice for free on Appa, just because everybody's kind of in it to win it. So I think that would, for sure. Mike, you just did a series, right, on Pastured Poultry Talk, kind of going through some of the basics, and that would be worth it. Meredith and Ryan.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Pastured Poultry Talk, starting with episode 104. If and you can catch them on Apple Podcasts, Google, or Spotify, or you can visit the webpage. Check them out. They kind of walk through some of the, my approach is not necessarily the checklist approach. I like to teach like what you should know and kind of why you would know it, so then you can make decisions about when things go wrong, or actually make decisions about what to do. So there's a lot of like, you should do this, but there's also a lot of, this is why, or this is what's happening kind of stuff. And that's kind of my approach when I talk about it. But this is going to be episode 6 here, kind of a cap off to that series, some questions. So if you've listened to that series, feel free to ask questions related to those other episodes or anything else that Spence and I have talked about on our shows. More than happy to do it. But that's a good series. And just plugging in with people who Spence said are in it to win it. It's hard to find good information.
Yeah, and I was telling someone the other day, I've got a friend, and we do a lot of stuff together for education and that, and in our church. But I was telling him, hey, when I have problems, I'm kind of at the point where I don't call any, the people that I would call would be like Jeff or you to bounce stuff off, but I don't, like I'm at a point now where I don't use anything from the government or extension or anything. That's nothing against them, but you want to talk to people who make a living doing this, because it is a radically different thing than what you're going to read in, any puffy magazine piece. Brian and Meredith, a little piece of advice before you get started: book dates with probably natural state processing there in Clinton, Arkansas. So I would, before you start anything, you guys need to work with your processing dates. If you're not planning on doing it yourself, you may want to think about doing your own processing. And I know a guy who sells processing equipment. I also have a tub plucker, if you guys, that can be refurbed, that I'll sell you for cheap, just because, I like the Navy, not really, but I think Meredith, was in the Navy. So, but yeah,
Right.
so hopefully that helps, guys. Let's see. And then Dan had a question.
We got Dan. Dan is joining us from somewhere in Australia. Sorry, I know it's a big place, but I don't know exactly where, Dan. But he wants to know more about value adds, what you're doing, what you see others doing market wise. It seems more and more producers are heading in this direction, and whole birds are less and less the core business. So we kind of started this conversation off talking about, I won't use the term again, but some sausage. That's obviously a value add for Spence. But someday I keep trying to edit this episode so I get some sausage in the mail. Like, that's my secret dream, some chorizo. But it hasn't happened yet. So
you can take Mike out of the Navy, but you can't take the Navy out of Mike. That's all I'm going to say on that.
So Spence he's amusing himself there.
I am great. Sorry,
you guys. Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think, Spence? I mean, give us.
Yeah.
If you have a thought on percentage of your sales that are value add, let's start there, and then you can kind of talk about your philosophy, and I can talk about what I do, because it's probably radically different, and what I see kind of happening community wide.
So the biggest thing, that the challenge, right, is to sell birds, and I think Dan kind of nailed it with whole birds. But so Dan, there's a couple things, like whole birds, you saturate that market pretty quick, and if you're doing it, you probably already realize that. So then you move to cut-ups, and cut-ups is just a way of moving more birds. You can look at it like we will make more money per doing cut-ups, and you can price accordingly. We make probably a little bit more. The problem with cut-ups is that you start getting stuck with individual parts. Like, man, last year it was beautiful, guys, because I had everything sold. My frames were getting sold to a ramen place in Tulsa. My wings were going to a couple different. I was selling to a DoubleTree restaurant up in Bentonville, which is where the Walmart headquarters were. So everything had a place. Thighs, you will not have a problem selling. Breasts, at least in my market, you won't have. There are always elderly white women that want 1 pound chicken breasts, and you can build, like, honestly, I get $10 a pound for a chicken breast, which is crazy to me, that people like our stuff that much. So you can kind of build in there, like, certain cuts pay for everything. And then the cuts that you're going to have problems selling, if you can find ways of selling it, that just kind of ups it from that whole bird. I shoot kind of for $2 net a bird. And when I say net, that accounts for like all my labor and everything, right? So, but you're rapidly going to finish all that. So that's when we step into stuff like chicken sausage. So chicken sausage is a great relief valve. One, it's a way of taking a bird that's like, I know scale probably doesn't work on the screen, but if you take you say you didn't get all your chickens processed, which happens to us because I'll get other people in the plant, people are in emergencies, and I'll push my batches back, or the weather. Like you get a really pretty week in summer, and all of a sudden your birds jump like 2 weeks worth of growth in 6 days because it's 85 degrees because it's been kind of rainy and cloudy. And so the chicken sausage one is kind of a management valve. If your birds get too big, you're not trying to sell someone one chicken breast that weighs 2 pounds, which is pretty easy to happen to you on a Cornish cross when you're doing it at scale. The other thing that you can do is I can take, a 7-pound chicken dressed, which is a big chicken. That's why you need Mike's heavy duty, large kill cones from Poultryman that don't rip like the other brands that are supposed to have lifetime guarantees.
This is not a commercial.
It is. If y'all knew the amount of work Mike does, Mike, it should be a commercial for Mike. So, but anyway, so you take all that and, you can get 3 pounds of sausage. So 3 pounds of sausage are, you sell that for $10 a pound, you won't have a problem selling it because it's chicken sausage. And it's not stuff where they've ground up the frames or done stuff like that, which is what we sell as dog food, is what most people sell as the commercial chicken sausage. So, you can add stuff like skin to boost your fat content. That's something that maybe you weren't selling, or you were selling for 50 cents a pound or $1 a pound for frames. The other thing that when you make chicken sausage is you can add 5% by weight of chicken hearts. And so I don't know what you guys sell chicken hearts for, but you probably don't sell them for $10 a pound. And so up to 5% by weight, it adds good texture. The other thing when you do chicken sausage, we've got several varieties that we do. And if you're really interested, contact me, fightingfarmerspence@gmail.com. We're starting to sell spice mixes for folks. We're not quite there yet, but if you want to try some of it, but you can take, if I take, like, we have a yellow curry ginger sausage where we use fresh ginger. And so, like, I buy ginger for $4 a pound, grate it up, and then I sell it for 10. So I'm like doubling my money on my ginger. When you add garlic, there's stuff you do, like you use minced onion, dried minced onion, or stuff like that, because it absorbs water weight. There's all kinds of stuff on that. So there's chicken sausage, which is great, but you really have to have a processor that'll work with you, or because our markets do not want crazy spice mixes. Most spice mixes are not geared towards your to your customers. And so that's why we've kind of went and redesigned our own. And the other thing that you can do, things like dog food, people will, if you can find people that feed raw, there are people that will pay more money to feed their pets than they will for themselves or their families, which morally, I don't know, but like profit wise, yay, we're all about. And so, and that's fine. Just do what you want to, but the one thing we found too is just running the frames. They're fairly easy on a grinder. So running the frames and packaging it into a small chub. And that's the other thing, right? Like that chicken sausage does is it takes that big chicken. I don't know if I finished that thought that I started earlier. It takes that huge chicken and you turn it into 3 1-pound chubs. So instead of having a chicken that's the size of a watermelon, you take it, you put it in 3 little 1-pound chubs that you can fit like 60 in a case. And so it's a good storage mechanism too. Broth is something, if you have, broth is not USDA inspected as long as it's under, I think, 2% by weight chicken. Most people won't give you any guff over it. So if you have a commercial kitchen, you can make broth. And as long as you sell it under this is for people in the States. So I don't know about you, Dan. But that's a great way of transforming stuff. We sell some broth. I thought it would be better. Granted, it's summer. So, but we'll see what it's like in the winter. The other thing with broth is we have to freeze it. We don't want to Tetra Pak, but that's a whole other thing. So those are some of the things for value added. So pet food, chicken sausage, smoking is an option. We do hot wings. So something you can do in your plant, super easy, especially if they do pork, is you can add hot sauce. There's some hot sauces that look for one that's just, I think Louisiana hot sauce is just chilies, salt, vinegar. I think that's red chili, salt, vinegar, which is what you want on your label, because your customers are not going to want sugar. And that's, same with sausages, right? And so if you have anybody that does any type of wet ham production and like a pork processor, if you can talk them into putting the chicken wings and they should have like a vacuum thing, and that'll help draw that hot sauce into the actual wing, and then you could package hot sauce wings. At some point I'm going to do like a Thai or Vietnamese style fish sauce wing. I think that'll sell well too, but the problem there is kind of some of the crazy ingredients, MSG being the main one in fish sauce. So, but those are some ideas, Dan. I don't know if that helps, but that'll give you something to start on and go.
Yeah, and I would just say that I think from the broader picture, value add is definitely the way it's going. I think it's kind of natural. It has to evolve into that value added processing space in order to get more mainstream adoption. The whole bird market is not really there commercially. I mean, like in the grocery stores here where I'm at least, people shop for breasts or thighs or whatever. So, and all those things that Spence said, I think is what that's starting to emerge. More and more people are starting to take that approach and really kind of reinvent what some of that value adding looks like, and not just go to the cut up. That's the first step. I just sold boneless breast in one-off packages for the first time this spring in about 10 years. Because I like to, my idea of value add was I'll cut it, I'll do anything you want to it, but you're going to get the whole chicken. And that doesn't always work.
8-piece cut up, and
I'm okay with that. I don't need to sell a lot of chicken, but that was my approach. But hopefully that helps, Dan.
Yeah. One other thing, be careful of stuff like boneless thighs. And even like what Mike was talking about, pick one type of chicken breast and run with it, because what'll happen is you'll start running out of inventory. So you'll have, once you go people will buy an endless amount of boneless thighs from you, but then you lose, I used to know it, like 20% maybe. How much is a thigh bone? Like 20% of the weight. So you got to upcharge. But the thing is, you could sell as many thighs probably as you could boneless thighs. So don't add stuff unless you saturate it. So when you first start off, don't start cutting up, just sell whole birds. And then once you feel like, okay, I've saturated the market, then move into cut ups. But when you add stuff and then you don't have it, you lose customers, or you create like customers that aren't happy. So work on keeping that consistent supply and then add things on slowly. Rome wasn't built in a day, or wherever. And whatever the saying, pick a saying, you get it, right? But fast is foolish, slow is wise when it comes to building your business. Because a lot of pastured poultry farms, and this is how Carla and I describe it, we'll have competition and they're flash in the pans. That's a term we use, flash in the pans. We'll call it a FIP. How about that? Because we got some military folks on here. But these FIPs, they're here and then they're gone in a year. And just do one thing, do it well, or at least profitably, and then continue to build on that. So that's my only thought. But let's call it good on the.
Yep, we'll move on. Mike. We got a next one. Should be pretty quick. Dave wants to know if either of us raised guinea fowl. No.
People do. I know in Pennsylvania there's chicken houses full of, or I guess guinea houses, but
yeah. Some people do. I know of varying qualities. It's good if you had the market. It's really a great eating bird. When we did a taste test, probably 6 or 7 years ago now, bunch of different chickens and a guinea, and everybody chose the guinea as their favorite tasting dish that day. So a lot of flavor there. Just don't have much experience with them. So
well, and the thing that Dave, the thing to look into when you price it are chicks. So your chick or whatever a guinea is, I think maybe it's a chick. Whatever a keat. There you go. See, that's why Mike runs the question and answer, folks. But the keats they're going to be expensive. You got to factor that in. Your feed conversion's not going to be great. So, just make sure you factor in all that, and processing. So processing on guinea fowl, Dave, something that'll work in your favor is it's called non-amenable. I don't know why they use the word amenable, but that means that the USDA doesn't inspect them or doesn't require inspection. And that would also include things like rabbits, muscovy ducks, that kind of stuff, kind of the wild stuff. They do some volunteer. So if you're going to sell, in some states would require it, but there are they're a little more leeway in selling that stuff than, but your state might have a say in it. So.
Yeah. Cool. And
all right,
Dave has another one here. We'll just flash this up here and then we'll come back to Elizabeth. Can Canadians join Appa?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we allow them in.
No, we need them because Canadians cancel out people like me and Mike.
There's
people like Canadians.
There's a nice, depending on where you're at in the provinces, there's a developing pastured poultry market there, and there's some opportunities, especially in Ontario. I think has some different programs that are making it more accessible. But yeah, we have Canadian members, not a lot. We are still burdened by our name a lot of times, but we do oddly enough raise poultry in both countries and do it on pasture and have a lot of things in common. So
maybe one day, Mike, you guys will call it Napa, the North American pasture poultry, and then people will come to us for car parts and pasture poultry advice.
I think that's thinking too small, Spence. So Elizabeth has a question here. Talking about processing, are you indoor, outdoor, USDA inspected? She wants to hear about wastewater disposal, septic, spray field, sewer. I'm outdoor, and I just run it off.
You are not a USDA inspected.
No.
Yeah.
I would be exempt more than likely.
Yeah. Likely. I'm going to tell those USDA hall monitors about you. Get them off the case, Mike.
Spence is USDA, and I'm sure he
indoor septic. Yeah. Just running off septic, which works great until someone stuffs a whole cow liver down a drain.
So you have a regular septic system there. Do you actually get that pumped on a regular basis, or do you have that? Does that have to be cleaned out on a more frequently than like a residential one?
I mean, it's a big one. Scott put in a big one. So, do this stuff out in the country in Arkansas is really good. Yeah.
Well, if you have a specific question there, Ann, just bring it back into the comments and we can tackle it. But it's important. I think I'll say this on inspecting. It's important that our communities start with what's available to them, and that's the PL 9492 exemptions, which is out of the Poultry Processing Inspection Act. I think that's called the PPIA. There's exemptions carved into that regulation that allows producers to process on farm and still put those birds into sale in certain ways. And some states can influence that, make it more restrictive, but that's a really great way to start if you can. And then we also need folks like Spence who are scaling up the USDA side. So there's two sides of that equation. Both of them are very, very important for the health of our industry or of our community. Yeah.
And Susan had some comments. Dan, she said about raw pet foods, and Susan knows a lot. She's a veterinarian. She said one of the gurus of feeding raw food, fresh and raw foods, is in Australia. So that would probably be a Susan thing. And also Susan is a board member of Appa, and she is Canadian. So and a very just generally wonderful person. So if you're a member of Appa, just put, and if you're not, sign up, and then you can talk to Susan, or just find Susan, Susan Beal, Beal. I'm sure you can find her online and that. So, but she's great. So, Elizabeth asks how big. Go ahead.
I just want to take this opportunity and acknowledge that Sue is joining us from Facebook. I feel like that's a minor celebration, Sue. Or maybe a step backwards. I'm not sure which.
And Dan is too.
Yes. Sue had to dust off her Facebook account to join us today.
Yeah. Elizabeth, she asked how big the septic tank is. About 95% of the time, it's big enough. That's all I know.
And the reason you don't know that is because the plant was built red meat by the guy who built it. He came in after the fact as a partner to put in poultry. So you weren't there for all the details.
Yeah. Occasionally I am there with a bucket though. And so on a really bad day. And so the other thing with Susan, she's looking at doing a USDA poultry facility. So I've been getting this question a lot. Here's my thoughts on, so for USDA, Susan, take them or leave them, they're free. All right. One, check right now for grants that USDA is pushing new processing plants to open up. So there's grants. I know Missouri just did a thing where they're giving $200,000 grants for state facility for all processors to try to expand processing capacity. There's some talk of like, how do we get that to go in Arkansas? For my partner and I were talking about that. It won't affect me, but man, he could spend that 200 grand like that. The other thing on that, Elizabeth, look heavily. I would take a very strong look into getting set up for deer. So deer are custom processed. You could shut your USDA plant down during deer season in Pennsylvania, which I imagine is probably about as popular as it is here in Arkansas. And like, I don't understand why like cutting up your own meat is such a big deal. It's a deer, but apparently it is, and you can make some bank on that. And you could probably make enough bank, to be honest, if you did it right, to where you could pay for most of the expenses of infrastructure expenses of your plant for probably a good portion of the year just off deer season. That's actually a model that I know several folks, including my partner, have done. So you can make a lot of money processing deer, drop the inspection. The other thing to consider, so we do red meat and poultry in the plant, and something that you're going to struggle with poultry is in the wintertime. Like, how are you going to keep the plant full? Because what's going to happen, and I'm going to give you some ideas here too. So the other thing that you got to look at is like your labor force. So it sounds good to shut down for a USDA plant. Well, we'll just shut down over the winter. You're going to lose your labor force, and that's going to kill you, because finding good employees is really difficult, which you probably already know. So something that Scott, my partner, does with that poultry rate of inspection, because you'll have that where you can process USDA poultry. He actually does a lot of repacking. I mean, by the pallet. He does tons and tons of stuff of like chicken fingers, that kind of stuff, for people that they're buying seconds from like Tyson or whatever, by the semi load. They're bringing them to the plant. And when we're not killing chickens on the chicken floor or packaging chickens, they're repackaging private label on that stuff. So that's an idea, but you got to figure out a way. How do I keep product moving through that plant? Even if it's just to keep your employees paid. Deer season, repackaging, people will probably find you once they realize you have a poultry writ of inspection. And some of those things are, can float your plant. So it's going to be hard to do just poultry with your plant and make a good living. And there's a plant in North Carolina called Mount Pilot, I think. Is that correct, Mike? Do you remember them? The North Carolina USDA plant?
Yeah, they're not in business anymore.
Exactly. And also Mount Pilot, Andy Griffith show. Crazy.
Wow.
There it is.
So, and I would just say, Elizabeth, I'm not sure where in Southeast PA you are, but I'm in Pennsylvania, and so it's always interesting and relevant to keep tabs on those options, because up until last year, we haven't had a USDA processor in plant or in state after Eberly shut down. So, anyway, yeah.
And you'll get surrounding state. That's the other thing. If you do poultry, one thing for me, and I'm kind of still struggling. Carla and I talk about the ethical implications of this, but like I had to call a guy who was saying, hey, it's kind of a weird call, but he's like, hey, my church gave me some land and they're going to fund me to start a pastured poultry operation. They already kind of do this with cows. And they're like, we want you to come. We want to come to your farm. We know you're busy. Let's set some time up so we can come to your farm, see how you do things. And we want to start like doing what you do in the same town. And then we want you to kill the birds. Sound great? And I'm like, no. So like one thing with having your own plant is it is kind of a way of controlling competition. And it's like, if you're going to compete for my customers, like, why are you? No. And I don't think there's anything ethically wrong with that. But I do a lot of out of state. So I try to focus on Tulsa in our area. So we've got some really good processing customers there, Stillwater, down in Little Rock. And it's a way for me to kind of maintain the turf and not get any more turf wars with, because it's a fairly limited market. We only have 250,000 people in our area. And it's the second biggest area in the state. So having the processing plant also kind of gives me the keys to that, and it's like, you can still compete against me. Just do your own processing plant thing.
Cool. Let's see. We'll just catch up some stuff here. Sue said Greg developed a plan for wastewater disposal. Greg has the constructed wetland, and he's done some webinars about that, some presentations about that. I think his webinar is on the Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network. And I wrote a story probably 6-7 years ago now, whenever he was on the board, which has probably been 6 years ago, maybe 8. I'm not sure. So pretty interesting to read. Greg's a smart cat.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Let's see. So I guess, Spence, we're cracking right here about an hour. I don't see any other questions. So if you have another question, you could probably sneak it in there. But this has been enjoyable. We got a pretty good flow going there of folks chiming in.
Yeah. A question I would have is, do y'all enjoy the podcast, the Fighting Farmer podcast? I can never tell. So, because it's a lot of, if there's value in it, but we haven't done one in a while, just honestly, because I'm like, is it worth the time? So if y'all enjoy it, let me know. Part of it too is we're so stinking busy, but if you guys like it, we'll continue to make that a priority. Something else, Mike, to kind of fill the time, if people have any last minute questions, is, we'll probably talk about this on the next podcast we do, if people find value in it, is just making hay from chickens, which is interesting because we just purchased this new farm, right? The Riverland. And because of some eminent domain stuff going on there, way to go, government. We can't really get started on it, and the contractors are taking their time. They're running a water line through the property, and a 2-foot water line, they're taking about 150 foot, it seems like, of easement. But we're kind of looking at the hay business. We're doing the cattle stuff. But one thing to keep in mind as you guys start your Meredith, Brian, as you guys start your Pastured Poultry, is you're going to have a lot of grass. And that grass is wonderful, and then it's going to start becoming a problem. So either plan on having ruminants, plan on doing some type of hay, but you're going to have a way to keep that grass under control. And brush hogging really isn't. It's just kind of a temporary solution, and the grass just compounds and gets worse and worse. I think there is a part of Pastured Poultry that is about nutrient management. You can build soil, but at some point you're always bringing in grain, and you're always leaving more in the soil than you're taking away. Because that little Cornish cross, best case scenario, has a 2-to-1, feed conversion, or, if you're not doing a great job, it may have a 4-to-1. But but you're bringing in 4 pounds of grain onto your pasture, 4 pounds of nutrients, and you're taking 1 pound of chicken off. Or 1 pound of grain is leaving, I guess would be the way to look at it. So that's just something long-term. And we've talked about that a lot on the podcast, about the making hay, or, maybe grazing cattle. So my wife says she likes the podcast, so that's enough for me. All right. Seth has a question.
Yeah. So Seth is asking if anyone does fermented feed on pasture. Interestingly enough, not sure, it'll probably hit within the next week or so. I have an interview with a gentleman in the Pacific Northwest, so out there in Washington State, who did a SARE grant for some feeding fermented feed, and I won't give away too much, but he actually has some valuable numbers and some data to share, and it's a pretty interesting setup and results. And so I think it opened my eyes. I was kind of surprised. I should tell you probably which way the data goes. It was fascinating. He found value in it in his trial. It improved some things, and I think there's still a lot of nuance to fermented feed, but I think it can and does work in different situations, and part of it has to be kind of figuring out if you're able to do it and make it work for you.
Yeah.
It's not a magic
it
bullet.
would be a disaster on our farm, Mike. Like,
yeah.
For us, there'd be mushrooms growing out of the feed if we tried it. So usually the only fermented feed we do is when a tornado blows through and rips some tarps off. So, but
and as we come into the end here, we got another question we'll get to, but just Spence mentioned the podcast. It's always one of the most loneliest things you can do, other than this live stream, which is the first time for either one of us, I think, and at least from our podcast perspective, is sit in front of a microphone and talk to nothing and just kind of record it, and you put it out there, and you don't ever really know what's happening. So if you're listening and something catches your ear, it's always nice to give an email, give a shout out, do something, acknowledge it. Been around long enough. I talked about this in my 100th episode, I think, is one of the latest times I talked about my experiences with podcasting and having that same question, what's happening out there on the other end of this voice. So there's always timely inputs sometimes. So I keep going. I'm just not regular, because it's the middle of summer and there's about 75,000 other things that need to get done too. So
if you were to plot podcast frequency, you'd notice a strong correlation to winter. Dave had a question.
Yep, let's go with Dave's question here. Non-GMO versus organic versus regular feed. Big difference. Customers prefer one or the other. So my take on the feed situation is you should buy the absolute best quality feed that you can, regardless of what it's made of. Because you can buy some really good feeds that are conventionally formulated. The idea here is actually you're shopping on the quality of the feed formulation and the ingredients inside of that feed. I prefer organic. I'm not really a non-GMO person, because I think there's too much middle ground and too much unknowns with non-GMO. I think it's a catch-all term. It's kind of like free range or pasture access. It just means a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah. And I agree. And we sell non-GMO poultry, so or fed non-GMO feed. I've tried actually pricing out, Mike, the conventional, and we can't get some component. We can't get conventional soybean meal, so it doesn't, like, my cost on it would save like 3 cents. Mike and I actually looked at potentially doing pullets here in the Midwest, and one of the things we were looking at to get costs down, where we would raise out kind of like how Moyers or them do. Mike sells pullets too if you need them. But we were looking at running them in chicken houses and that. And my feed company, it's like it came in way too high. And so it's like, well, let's drop down conventional feed. And it didn't drop the price at all because they can't get all the stuff we need. So I do non-GMO because that's the best ration I can get. Ideally, and I'm kind of like Mike, I'm more concerned about the quality of the feed. I can't do organic in Arkansas because of my price points. I mean, like, and it's interesting, Mike. Carla and I talk a lot. Carla does the deliveries, and it's been really neat to get out and make deliveries. And I hear this a lot from Carla, and I do them when she can't do them or needs a day off. The people, our customers at Across the Creek Farm, are not people with tons of money. I mean, they are people that look like they don't look like us. We've got a very diverse group of folks, a lot of ethnicities and all kinds of age and all that. But their homes look like our homes, like a lot of modest homes. It's like They don't have like super corporate jobs. In fact, Carla was telling me the story of people in corporate America are the ones that try to like negotiate the price down. And it's like, bro, you're making like 6 digits and you live in Arkansas. Stop it. Like, come on, man. We're not going to buy your chicken breast because it's too expensive for us. It's like, okay,
Right.
later, Gator. Yeah. So price is a big deal for me. I think that's less like if you're in California, that's less of an issue. If you're in, if you're maybe up in the Northeast, where there's more people and cost of living's a little higher. So, but those are just some of my things. The other thing about organic, you can sell all the organic feed you want. Your birds will not be certified organic unless you have a certified organic processor. And good luck finding that,
Yeah, and just I would just say on that feed, so here, and I talked about this, so I won't rehash it too much, but I have bad experiences with the non-GMO feed land, just not getting what I expected, and discovering it. But the broilers this year, we went back to a conventional feed because I'm just, it's for me, it's one or the other. I'm okay with either one in a lot of cases. Preference for my family is organic, but if I'm trying to reach out and broaden the market, just the conventional feed is what I went with because we have a very similar demographic here to what you got, Spence. It's rural, and price sensitivity is a real thing. And now my turkeys, when the turkeys come in on Monday, they're going to go organic feed all the way from day one because I'm not going to trust that is the best quality feed I can get is the organic one for my turkeys and the starter. So, and I trust that formulation from Terrell with, I just trust it.
Yeah.
So that's, and that's where we're going to go with that. So that's just a decision. Some perspectives, I guess.
And it's going to vary, right, Mike? So organic is more of an option up north because of field peas, and your protein source in the South, you're kind of limited to soybeans, realistically, as to what will grow locally. As you get up north, you have field peas. There's some things that regionally make it more viable, like triticale. I don't know if that's how you say it. It's a higher protein, I think, wheat. So, but there's regionally, there's going to be more options depending on where you're at. So that's also going to factor into the mills. Ideally, moving forward in the future, I want to grind our own feed on the farm. I've got the labor. I can teach Drew as our farm manager. I think that's something he'd be really interested in. And because one thing with feed that you have to consider, especially bagged feed and that kind of stuff. I know Dave just mentioned he gets bagged feed. Is age of the feed, especially in summertime. So, because your feed will go stale, the fats in it, especially if you're using a full fat soybean, go rancid, your gains drop. So if you can grind that feed, from that whole grain, which stores much, much better, you'll see a lot of bump ups. You'll be able to more fine tune. And in that case, a conventional on-farm milled with like Fertrell minerals, Fertrell is really the only mineral company I trust from experience. So if you were to do that, that's going to be better than any bagged feed, organic or biomin. I don't know, whatever that it is, So regionally, that's going to play a part of it.
Yeah, and I know when soy-free feed is still pretty popular and it's growing in popularity, but and I always figure, when I was trying to decide about that stuff, I'm like, well, if I got to truck all my ingredients in from, the other coast or thousands of miles, what value does that have? There's a trade-off in my mind, and not saying it would never import those ingredients, but I think there's something to be said for working within the system that you have, and there's a cost, there's a footprint, impact there as well. So,
and soy free, if they screw up soy free, you are hosed because that thing, that is a fine-tuned feed right there. If it's not just right, you're going to be paying out of your pocket. Besides the fact it's expensive.
Yep. So let's catch up some of these here. Sue, going back to your nutrient problems, Spence. Sue said you can provide a service in leasing land for grazing or doing custom grazing. That way you don't have to actually own the animals, the hoof stock.
Well, Mike, I've talked to people about that, and grass-fed cattle farmers are some of the cheapest folks I know. And so I talked to, and they're the best ones in Arkansas that do it. And they're like, well, why don't you lease it to us? And I'm like, okay, well, what are you thinking? And they're like, they gave me it was lower than what I pay the land rent per acre on. And I'm like, so I'm supposed to supply you with water. I'm going to give up a chunk of my field. And then your cows are probably at some point going to get out and go eat all the baked chicken pate as they burst through my pens. It's like, heck no. So I think that it could potentially be a possibility. My experience in my area is, the amount of money, a factor to consider is how much money, what's the profitability potential per acre, and like leasing land to a bunch of cheap cattle farmers. At least Arky cattle farmers, I'd be paying for the privilege. And then they complain all the time. Grass-fed people complain all the time. Like, raise chickens, man. Loosen up.
Then we got a comment there from Chuck. He loves the podcast, enjoys the podcast, I should say. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for listening.
Right in the fields, Chuck.
We got Elizabeth comes back with, she says she's been running the fry pan specials on pasture for 16 weeks and noticed that the breeds tend to gang up on other breeds. Yeah, because that's all the wired heritage breeds that nobody wants.
That's all the stuff that no
one
wants.
All the cockerels.
Don't do that.
Yeah. Process them at 14.
Yeah. Or when you get the shipment of chicks in, just don't do that. But Elizabeth, you're going to have to be a little bit more deliberate. That would, if profitability is your so those would be, if you don't know that frying pan special, that would be layers, right? Like, and that would be all the breeds, the crazy breeds that they don't sell. That's why it's the hatchery's way of getting rid of them. A better way, a more deliberate way, and this is part of my Mike Tour 2020, is Micapalooza, is to buy pullets from Mike Badger. If Elizabeth, because you're up in Pennsylvania, Mike sells point-of-lay pullets, raising pullet hens, the baby chicks, or raising laying chicks is crazy, because at some point there's going to be a storm and they're all going to pile and kill themselves. So it's a fine art to find a guy that can raise layers on scale, and I've found it's much easier in terms of management and in terms of cost to purchase a beak-on point-of-lay pullet. In fact, it's worth so much that I am actually paying Mike this fall to bring a trailer load of pullets down to Arkansas, because that is how much I value the pullets that he sells. So, anyways, I'm not pushing Mike. I buy them from someone else. That's fine. But if you're wanting to get serious about making money on layers, until you're just like the layer people, I would say look at buying point-of-lay pullets, beak on, and then because then you can the cost of the bird is, each one of our eggs is worth 25 cents. And so for Mike, if I buy a pullet for $10 by the time it gets down here, or however much, $12, whatever, that's just whatever the amount is divided by 25. That's how many eggs I got to get out of it to pay for the cost. And I don't have 5 months of brooding and risk and management and time. Yeah. So that's my suggestion there.
The fry pan, Spence, that was a great dissertation, but the fry pan special is the meat birds. It's the Rhode Island. So she's getting, it's Rhode Island Reds, the Buffs, the Barred Rocks, those things. So
I thought you
dual
said
purpose.
meat birds, Mike.
Yeah, they're the dual purpose ones. So, but they're still the hatchery selection of the cockerels. It's still, I've never seen anybody run larger volumes of those and do it, but it's she's trolling you now. We're doing.
Yeah, she is. That's right. Troll away, Elizabeth.
So yeah, but as far as the ganging up, I would just say at 16 weeks, you probably got a lot of cockerels in there. So that's not unheard of. Go 15 or 14. We're gonna wrap this up here next couple
got
minutes.
Egg washing.
Yeah,
got an egg washing question. That's a good
Dave
one.
Aspinall says he loves both podcasts, so there's some feedback. And then we got an egg washing question. Looking for equipment.
Yeah. So I think a good place is I use a Gibson egg washer. And it just mounts on a sink. It's like about $1,000. It's good enough up to 500 chickens, 600 chickens. There's the Aqua Magic, which are like the crazy expensive ones. There's a new one, right, Mike? But I can't remember the name of it. I see it advertised in Appa. It's kind of a mid-range from the Gibson. I think the Cadmans have it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get his name. It's William Burkholder in Virginia, and it's
you should sponsor your show. Then you know it right off, right?
Well, he's an Appa business member.
Yeah. You'll find it in the Appa look up your magazine. It's going to drive Mike crazy all night. He's going to shut it down early to go remember what that is. You can see it on him. But it's in the Appa. You'll see ads for it. It's kind of a mid-price. Do you remember about what they run? It's like $4,000.
Yeah, I think he's probably about $5,000, give or take a few there.
Yeah, but it has the graders where it grades out eggs. I think the attachment's got fans, which is really important for drying. The Gibson Ridge, we just have a towel we lay them out on, then we have to repack it. So if you're more serious about eggs than we are, look at him. He's diving into the archives. That would be the brand, and Mike's about to find it. So what's your market on those meat birds? I'm not really sure which. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I think that was he was asking Elizabeth what she was selling them. So there's a conversation happening there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fine. Go for it, guys.
The Power Scrub.
That's it. Power Scrub. So look up Power Scrub, Marty. Power Scrub, Gibson. There it is. That's high tech technology right there. And Gibson. That's I think GIB. Is it GIBSON? Gibson Ridge. They're out of Ohio, and it's just an old 50 style thing that they brought back. They work really well. That it just plugs right into your. Just get a sink, and it'll work. You can do it in your kitchen. All right,
cool.
And I think that's about it.
Yeah, let's call it there. Thanks everybody for jumping in here. It's fun. Thanks, Spence, for giving this a whirl. Maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah. Any activities or anything? Anything coming up that folks to look forward to, Mike?
Boy, it's summer. I think biggest thing on the radar. Appa's got a heritage poultry breeding presentation, a live stream next Tuesday.
Okay.
We're going to kind of dive into some profit center information. That'll be exciting to see where that goes. Appa's planning to be at Seven Springs Mother Earth News Fair in Pennsylvania in September. Probably mask up, but
any pullets? If people fall pullets, is that
sold out? Yeah, no need to
sold
ask.
Out. Yeah, they're all going to Arkansas.
I would love to have another 4,000 of them, but I don't.
Yeah.
Pullet
business. What about spring?
Pullets, yeah, spring. I still have. Should be April. I don't have that time frame nailed down yet, but expect some in April. And I'm actually here's the
Blow
news.
his inbox up.
I'm actually
go ahead, Mike.
Here's the news. In May, I think end of May, I will have soy-free full beak pullets raised non-GMO feed for Terrell management. So
boom,
good stuff.
There you have it. Yeah.
So there's
all the pullets.
No fall pullets. So yeah,
that's like you doing boneless thighs. You realize that you don't have Mike. You need to go back and listen to the beginning of the stream. You can't fill the pullet market, and you're doing all these highfalutin no soy.
I can fill it.
That is your boneless thigh.
Yeah. Let me tell you about. Well, we'll talk about margin some other day.
True.
There's
Okay,
this
I
thing
get it.
called competition. I got a mortgage
Yeah,
to pay.
maybe it's not your okay, I stand correct.
And then of course we're trying to plan the Appa conference. So not sure what that looks like. But
yeah,
that's good stuff.
All right, guys.
Any
Well,
parting
hey, it's
wisdom?
been fun.
Yeah.
No, just no.
All right. Plug your show, Spence. Where do we get the Fighting Farmer?
Just wherever you get podcasts, and at some point we'll get together and record another one.
Yep, and you can
before Christmas.
Before Christmas, yep. And you can find Pastured Poultry Talk at pasturedpoultrytalk.com, and it'll get you to wherever you need to go. And we got some exciting episodes coming out. Next one is on soy-free, or not soy-free. It's on fermentation. It's
oh, there you go. There's someone. Yeah. And hey, disregard my I make fun of heritage birds, but that's just me. Sometimes I'm allowed a little bit of ignorance in my life. So, and the big thing, like if you can make money at it and it feeds your family, go for it. So I get made fun of all the time, Mike, by cattle people. You'll never see a belt buckle with a chicken on it. Maybe I need to make one. That's what I need to do.
That's right. Well, you should join the live stream that Appa is going to put on next week, and you can discover all the profit centers of poultry breeding. There's 7 of them at least. That's the hook.
I need to take care of the Spencer breeding I've done. Like keeping up with my kids is a. I need to take care of them first. So. State champs.
All right.
2019.
All right. It's been fun, folks. Thanks. We're out of here. It's getting crazy. So we're going to shut it down.
Have a good night.
Yeah. All right. Good night.